Hello, welcome to my latest tutorial, which is the Hollywood Handbag by Pink Pony Designs. It's a lovely bag to make, very unique. It's not one I've made before, and I was intrigued as to how it went together. I do hope it helps some of you with making your bag. Please, if you do use any of my tutorials, when you post your bags, I would be very grateful if you posted a link to the tutorial you used. That's how we get the word out there, so that would be very helpful. Anyway, without further ado, here's the tutorial. Enjoy, and I'll see you again soon. To begin with, I cut out the only pattern piece that we have with this pattern, which is for the flap. I cut out two of the pattern pieces and stuck them together, and then I laminated them, which I do with all my pattern pieces. I do have a tutorial on my channel for laminating pattern pieces and what I do, etc, etc. So do take a look. I will put the link to it in the video description for this tutorial. So I cut out my flap, and I'm using my decorative cotton fabric for the flap. One of them I've just interfaced with Shapeflex SF101, and the other one I interfaced first, and then I stuck my foam down. Now, I never fuse foam to my fabrics, because when you turn your bag, it puckers, creases, wrinkles, you name it, it does it, and it looks horrendous, and you cannot get it out. Once it's there, it's there. And sadly, I see so many people posting their bags, and you can see what's happened, and it's such a shame, because their bags are beautiful. It's so much hard work, and it does taint the look of the bag. But Heat and Bond Light is fine. So,
sorry, I didn't understand.
That's Google talking to me. Google off. Crazy. The Heat and Bond Light doesn't wrinkle when you've turned it through, etc. So I prefer to use that. I've not used foam on this bag. I'm using headliner, which I know I say, oh, ghastly stuff, horrible stuff, don't use it. Generally, that's my rule. I don't use it. However, on this bag, it's a nice small bag, and the foam I use, which is Flex Foam, Pellon Flex Foam, is very thick and dense. And when you make a little bag and you use that foam, it really doesn't give you much room for anything else, and it's very bulky for a small bag. So I buy this particular headliner, which is lined, and it is actually quite a nice headliner as headliners go. I bought it a long time ago, and I took up the courage to use it on a couple of bags ago on a backpack that I made, and I was quite impressed with it. So I'm going to eat my words, go back on what I said. Headliner does have its use occasionally. General rule of thumb, no. But you use what you want, you use what you like. So I fused the flap. The foam has to be 3/8 of an inch smaller in from the edge, for the seam allowance. And then we've got all our other bits and pieces. Now, everything is in the pattern, the measurements, and I'm very sorry, I'm yawning. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, I haven't slept a wink, so I'm really tired, but I can't sleep, so there you go. So I do apologise if I keep yawning. Okay, so I don't give the measurements out on the video, because if I do that, it's fairly easy to guess what this size this would be, and then you can get the pattern for free. So I don't give out the measurements, so that you do have to buy the pattern. So I'm using oh, I'm so sorry, the lining fabric and my decorative fabric to make my strap, which I always think is nice, makes a nice contrast. I've got my D-ring fabric, my handle, and I've interfaced them down the centre. The flap strap, again, interfaced down the centre, so it's like a 1-inch strip, so that these will fold in and it's not too bulky then. Although the handle's going to have the more to it, added interfacing. I've got my lining pieces, 4 of the slip pockets, which I'm using my decorative fabric for, and my little zip tabs. And then we've got our main exterior pieces. I have made this, I've quilted this. You can see my headliner. And this is what it looks like when it's finished. I drew lines using my dissolvable ink pen, heat dissolvable ink pen, and oh, sorry, trying to find. What I started with was I'd measured the 16.5 inches, and then started at 8.25 inch, and then went up to the top corner. That's how I did it. That's my iron going off. My goodness me. And that's how I measured mine. And I did both pieces exactly the same, so they're identical. And I did them 1 inch apart, and then I went across 1 inch apart. And I used these lines, and I started in the same place and did the same. So that's that. And as you will see, I get my iron, and yeah, it's gone a little bit cool because it was sat, so it switched itself off. Okay, as you can see, it disappears before your eyes. Now, you can buy quilted fabric. I've even got some here actually, but this is much larger quilting, so that would be no good for this bag anyway. And it comes with some thin wadding in it. So if you do buy quilted fabric, because you can get the small enough quilting, you still need to add foam on the back. This is not strong enough, there's no substance to it, so you do need to add foam. You can do vertical lines, horizontal lines, whatever you fancy. Free motion embroidery, just doing all squiggles and swirls. Have some fun with it. Have a play around. So that's all the pieces. We've got my hardware, which isn't too much. We've got 2 clasps, 4 D-rings. The measurements, again, the sizes are in the pattern piece. My handmade label, 2 zip pulls, and then my lock. And I've got this lock, which I fancied using. That will go along the bottom of the flap. Go that way actually. Go along the bottom of the flap. So that's that with the washer. And I've also got my zip, which I haven't cut yet, so I'll be doing my 2 zips. So without further ado, we shall get on with the pattern, with the flap first. Right, so we need to get our flap that has the foam attached, and then we need our flap strap, and get my little ironing pad. Draw a line down the centre. And fold the edges in to that line. Like so. And do the same with the other side. And really give it a good press. You want those edges to be nice and crisp. Okay. And now, get some double-sided tape. And this is a sewable tape. It's not that crafter's tape that you can buy that does paper, you know, like used for paper, that gums up the needle. This is one that I buy. It's a German brand. It's lovely. Have I got? Yeah, I have got one that's in the bag still. I buy this from Bag, Kits and Glitzy Bits Facebook group. And it's Style Fix tape by Farben Mix. So it's a German company. 50 metres, and it's 4 metres wide, 4 millimetres wide, should I say. And it's £8.50. It goes a long way. Anne, whose Bag Hits and Glitzy Bits, also sells a much cheaper double-sided tape. This is 3 millimetres wide, or 4 millimetres, 3 millimetres. It's even narrower. On a 50 metre roll, and it's 30p, would you believe? Crazy prices. So I also use this, and I've had no trouble sewing with it. So they're my tape, because I'm always being asked what tape I use. So there you have it. So that's the double-sided tape. And we get the flap. And we want this to go 1 3/8 inches above the edge. So my ruler's at 1 3/8 of an inch. And peel the double-sided tape off both sides. So I'm getting used to the new camera angle. My husband's rigged it up so the tripod's hanging from the ceiling, so it's directly overhead. I'm hoping it works out much better. So I'm just getting used to where it is. That's why I've got this rectangle showing me to remind me where the camera is filming down onto. So double check it didn't shift. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. And now I'm going to stitch along both edges, very close to the edge, straight across. Okay, so I've stitched it, and I wanted to show you, I love showing you any mistakes I have, to show you that it happens. You're not the only one it happens to. And where possible, I show you ways to get out of it, or we have to go back to the drawing board. And I don't know if you can see it, whether it's that obvious, but it bows down. So as I've stitched, it's shifted. And if I put my ruler there, you'll see, in fact, if I put the pattern piece, because it's white, it'll be more obvious. You'll see how it goes up each side. So I've got to unpick it and reattach it. and be a lot more careful. I'll probably put a couple of pins across to hold it in place. So I suggest that's what you do. So I shall go back, unpick it and redo it and come back and show you when I've done it. Okay, so this time it's stitched nice and straight. I put in pins there to hold it in place and stop it from slipping at all. And now what we need to do is get the other side of the flap and put the right sides together and stitch all the way around at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but not the long straight edge. I will say at this point, if you've been using directional fabric, to make sure it is in the right direction. So I shall stitch this and come back. Okay, so I've stitched around, and if you're unsure about getting the exact measurements, draw the line that you need to go around the curve, and that way you can follow the line and not worry too much. And if I turn over, you can see that the foam is just inside the seam allowance. It's just slightly caught it there. So it's a good measurement for that. And the other thing we need to do now is to cut notches in the curved part. And we start by cutting a V on this corner so that when it folds, they can come together like so and not have the bulk. And I cut another V and another one. So on both corners there's 3 notches. And then I just trim them down, just to reduce the bulk. And the reason I cut the notches first rather than trimming the bulk is I just find it easier to do it this way. But if you want to trim the edge down first, then cut your notches, by all means do that. We'll have our little ways, don't we? Okay, and trim them down. Okay, and then we turn this right side out. Had there been any foam in the seam allowance, I would have trimmed that out as well. But there's no need to do that. So we want to make sure that we really push these rounded corners out. And if you wanted to, I didn't on this occasion, but if you wanted to, you could always add piping around your flap as well, which gives a nice look. So you can add these little hacks of your own. Right, so I'm just using a tool to push the corners out fully. And then I'm just going to press this down, making sure that the curled edge, at the moment it's on the front, I want to get it round to the back. So I'm going to go and press that, and then I'm going to top stitch around the edge. So here she is with her top stitched. And then we've got the handle. Now I'm not going to add my handle because I don't want to, but I thought I'd show you how to make it anyway. So we get our handle piece, measurements are in the pattern piece, and we mark a line down the centre like we did for the flap accent piece. And then I'm just getting some double-sided tape. This is one that's a craft tape that you can't sew on, but I'm not going to be sewing this part, so I'm okay to use it. I like to use it because it's a really strong hold, so I flip between double-sided tape according to the use, and then peel the backing off and turn the edges in to the centre. Oh, I should say actually that you could use a stronger interfacing for the handle. You could use a strip of Peltex. I've just used Shapeflex SF101, but I will say if you stitch some vertical lines or horizontal lines, depending on which way you're looking at it, in the handle, it will strengthen it, but so I don't think you really need to. So that's it brought in, and then what we're going to do is fold it so that it's the right sides together and just stitch these two ends. So I'm just going to pop and do that now. So I've stitched the ends and just trimming the seam allowance down to 1/4 inch. And I did say about the Peltex, I don't think you'll need to actually, because I haven't made this yet. I wasn't sure, but I don't think you can use the Peltex. I don't. So I would just stick with the interfacing, and I think the pattern would say if you needed to use something stronger. So ignore my previous comment about the Peltex. So we turn it right side out and just push the corners out like so. And I'm going to press, and we stitch the open edge closed and stitch all the way round, sort of like a top stitch, and then I shall come back. Okay, so I've stitched that on all the 4 edges, and bear with me because I am reading this off the thing, obviously, because I haven't made it myself. But what you need to do, which I'm not going to do, is dab glue on the ends and fold them over by 1/2 inch. So we'll pretend I did that, and then turn it back over so that the folded edges will be face down. And then you need to measure from this top piece, top edge, 1 1/8 down from the top, 1 inch and 1/8 inch down from the top, and you need to come in so that it's 1 3/4 inch from the side. So 1 3/4 inch. So you'll be placing it there, and then again there, like that. And then you'd use a rivet to attach it. I personally think just glue a little bit, just to get it to stay in place, and then put rivets in. You can sew it, but I think it might be a little bit bulky for most domestic machines. So that's how you add your handle anyway, which, as I said, I'm not doing because I'm choosing not to have a handle. So we go on from there now. to doing the lining slip pocket. So I'll put that aside for now. And then we get our lining slip pocket pieces. And we need to fold them at the long edge and put them right sides together. And then we're going to stitch along that edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do it with both of them and then turn them the right side out. Right, so I've turned them the right side out, and then you've got the seam at the bottom, and I just turned the seam slightly to the back so that it can't be seen on the front, and then I top stitched along the folded edge. And I pressed it so it was nice crisp edge. So you want to fold it so that, open it up, fold it so that the seam is slightly rolled to the back. Press and then top stitch. And now we get our lining pieces, 2 of our lining pieces. And this is the reason why I've done the decorative fabric for the slip pockets, because I think it's a nice contrast for the black lining. And we need to place the pocket down 2 inches from the top. If you're doing the small bag, it's 1.5 inches, but I'm doing the bigger bag. So, and again, if you're doing directional fabric, make sure you have all got the right direction. And I like to pin them at this point. And one in the middle. So that's nice and secure, and the line is still 2 inches. And then we want to mark for the pockets. Now it's entirely up to you where you want to have your pockets. If you only want to do 2 pockets, you can. I'm going to do 2 pockets on one side and 3 pockets on the other side, just to change it up a little. And I'm going to get my heat dissolvable pen and measure for the centre. It's going to land right on a black spot. So I use the white one. So I don't know if you can see that or not, but I've drawn the line there. So I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to stitch along the bottom, and I'm also going to stitch from the bottom to the top. Don't stitch from the top because you could end up with a wrinkle at the bottom. So I'm just going to move that pin slightly as well because it's right where I need to stitch. So that's that one done. And then the other pocket, again, 2 inches from the top. And this time I'm going to do 3 pockets. Just check that it's still, yep, that's still okay. And so, bearing in mind for the seam allowance, I'm going to do the pockets that it's 1/2 inch from each side. I will have 3 inch wide pockets. So it will be 3.5, 3, 3.5, because you've got to allow for the seam allowance. So I shall take this to the machine and stitch both pockets. So here are the slip pockets all stitched, and I ironed the ink away. I've also added my label, which I do to all my bags. So I've got 3 little pockets and 2 bigger pockets. So we pop them aside as well. And now we're going to make our D-rings. And by the way, whilst I remember, people always ask me, where did you get that from? Where did you get that from? And you're bound to ask, some of you, where I got this fabric. And although I'm in the UK, I bought it from Joann's. A friend went to the store and got a lot of fabric that I ordered many years ago, and it's Joann's own make. It's keepsake calico for Joann's, so you probably won't be able to get it now, I'm not sure, but yeah, so that's that. Okay, for the D-rings, again, draw a line halfway along, and then getting my double-sided tape, I just put some either side of the line that I've just drawn, and then peel the backing off. Like so. Again on the other side. And then I'm going to get another piece of double-sided tape. And then fold it in half again. Making sure that the 2 edges marry nicely so that you've not got one higher than the other. And then take it to your machine and stitch down both sides. I've stitched down both sides, and now we need to cut it into 4 pieces. So they need to be 1.5 inches long. Okay, so what we need to do is get a D-ring, slip it on, fold together, and glue based or double-sided tape these 2 edges together. I'm going to actually baste all of them and do that with all 4 pieces. here are the 4 tabs made, and what we need to do is get our back exterior piece, and I'm just going to mark. You need to put them an inch from each end. So I'm just marking okay. And I get my double-sided tape, my best friend, put some on the bottom, pull the backing off, and then you want to place it this side of the line that you've marked, like so. So you've got an inch. And we do that with all 4 pieces. Sometimes the backing doesn't want to come away. And I'm just going to baste each of these in place. Now we come to our zips. I've got number 5 zips here. You can use number 3, but it's very narrow, the seam allowance for attaching them, and you run the risk of, once you've sewn the zips on, you won't be able to open them because the seams will come too close. So I always like to use number 5 zips for the bag openings, etc. For zip pockets I use number 3. So I've made the zips, added my own zip pulls, and I've made them the length that's required according to the pattern. And I've got my zipper tabs here, and what you need to do is looking at them when the short end is nearest to you, and fold and press in the middle in half, open up, and then press the 2 edges into the centre, press it, and then just give another little press there. And then you want to get your zip, open up your zipper tab, and using a small amount of double-sided tape, just place across there, just to temporarily hold the zipper tab. And you're doing the right side to the right side of the zip, so I'm looking at the wrong side of the zipper tab in case you're using pattern fabric, and we line up edge to edge. So we're now looking at the wrong side of the fabric, the right side of the zip is facing upwards, and we're just going to base stitch along there, just on the right side of the crease that we've made, just slightly on the right side. If you do it right on, then you run the risk of not being able to take this over fully. So do it just to the right, so you're 1/4 inch seam allowance really. And then once you've stitched along there, we bring it up and over, so you should find the crease is against your zip end. And if you turn it over and then fold this part again, so it's like that, and it should be equal to this side, take it to the machine and just top stitch 1/8 inch seam allowance, and it should stitch that in with it. I've stitched both zips with the tab ends on each one, and as you can see, it's been caught on the other side as well. And incidentally, I'm using number 5 zips. They're slightly wider than the number 3, so they allow for it. I'm not sure if I mentioned that previously, so I'm just mentioning it now. And if I've mentioned it twice, then I've just reminded you. So we just pop them aside for a second, and we need to get our other exterior piece. That's the one without the D-rings. We did the one with the D-rings earlier. We're getting the piece without the D-rings. And I've jumped ahead a little bit. With the short edge, we need to get our flap, and we place it right sides to the exterior. So there's right sides together. I'm looking at the inside of my flap, and just base stitch it in place. And you've got 3/4 inch at each side. So that, make sure it's central. So I just wanted to do that to save backwards and forwards. And then we want to get one of the zips and just add some more double-sided tape. I'm going to get my really narrow one. In fact, I've got one here that I've already started. I'm trying to open up another one, and I've got one here. So we need to add this tape, if I can find the opening. Had it a minute ago. There we go. And just go over the edge by 1/4 inch, because the zip with the tabs is just slightly longer than the flap. Okay, so depending on whether you're left or right-handed, depends on where you place your zip. I'm right-handed. I'm just trying to peel the backing off. I'm right-handed, so what we need to do, if you're right-handed, we're placing the zip face down, and we want to place it so that the zip pull with the zip closed is on the right. So, and if you're left-handed, then obviously you want to do the opposite. So I'm just going to turn it my way so that I can see what I'm doing. And just place it along the edge. And then I'm going to stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that's why it's best to use a number 5 zip, because if you did it with a number 3, you'd be very close to the teeth. So I shall go and stitch this. So I've stitched it at 1/4 inch, and just make sure that you've hidden the raw edge of the flap, that you can't see it. If you're seeing more edges anywhere, then you need to stitch it a bit deeper or unpick and move the flap up a bit more. So just make sure that you've got no raw edges there to be seen at all. And now the next thing to do is to get one of our lining pieces. It's entirely up to you whether you use one of the plain ones that are left or one of the ones where you made the slip pockets earlier. I'm going to use the one that I made earlier and that I added my label to. This is because once it goes round, like so, and you open your flap, the first thing I see is the label. So we need to add some more trusty double-sided tape. Again, I'm going to turn it this way up so I can see it better, and I'm going to go from end to end this time. And I like to use my narrow one because when you use a 1/4 inch tape and you're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance, for example, there's a huge risk that you'll see some of it. So I like to make sure that my tape won't get seen. So now we spend ages trying to get the backing off. That's it. Right, make sure, obviously I've got my label which will tell me, but make sure your the tops of your pockets are near the top of this, and then just lay it down so you're sandwiching the zip and the flap like so. And then we take this to the machine, and you can stitch, but 1/4, or if you've got a wide enough zip tape, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we've stitched along the top there, and if we just fold it open and press the seam away from the zip. Now it's actually feeling quite bulky in there, I think, with all the layers. So I'm going to trim some of the seam allowance down. Now if I was to trim the whole lot down, we'd still end up with a bulky seam, just shorter. So a little tip that I learnt from my dressmaking days is to just layer the seams. So I'm pulling, because it had double-sided tape, I'm pulling the double-sided tape away to separate them, and I'm going to actually use my double curved scissors that I use for my applique, because they're a bit more controllable, and I'm going to leave the zip tape and this side of the lining intact, and I'm going to trim this side that has the flap on, because the flap is causing quite a lot of bulk. And I mean, these scissors are super sharp, but even that, you can see, is a bit difficult to trim. I'm going to go back to my dressmaking scissors because they are a lot sharper. So I'm just trimming part of the seam just to reduce the bulk, and it sort of then grades it down into sort of steps. So it's like a slope rather than a sudden step down, if you know what I mean. And I just want to make sure that I'm keeping the zip out of the way, and this side is wanting to get in on the action. So you just have to take your time very carefully. Right, let's see how we go with that. Oh, that feels much better. It's not nearly as bulky. I don't know if you can tell the difference on the camera, but it was just really bulky and I didn't like it at all. So if you've got the same sort of problem, just trim the side that has the flap, and that makes a huge difference. Okay, so now we need to get our other piece with the D-rings attached. And I've already put some double-sided tape at the top, stopping 1/2 inch from each end. And I shall remove the backing. And we need to get it so that the flap is down, all this is down, and the zip is pointing up. I'm going to turn it round for ease of seeing it, and place the zipper tape along. It's a bit one-sided. So that's better. Oh my goodness me, the zip pull keeps sticking to the tape. Okay. So I'm just going to stitch along there 1/4 inch seam allowance to fix that in place. Right, so I've base stitched it, and I beg your pardon, I did 1/8 inch seam allowance, not 1/4 inch. And we need to get our, I'm just checking for the bulkiness again, but that's fine. We need to get our other lining piece that we made earlier with the pockets, and making sure that they're in the same direction, pointing upwards, and turning it upside down again. And we just need to, it is getting a little bit bulky in places. If you find that it's not wanting to behave and it's going to want to keep going up out of the way, or in the way should I say, just get some pins and just pin the lining, pull it down and pin it through the layers, just to keep it out of the way. I'll do another one in the middle there, like so. So that helps a little bit. And I'm going to get some more of the thinner double-sided tape and go from edge to edge this time. Peel the backing off on this end. And then making sure that the pocket openings are at the top. Lay the edge down. And then take it to the machine and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I should have clarified, if you stitched the first side of the zip with 3/8 inch seam allowance, then do the same on this side. Also, if you stitched a 1/4 inch, do the same on that side. So whatever your first seam allowance on the first side of the zip was, you need to make sure it's the same on the other side so that they match. So that's them stitched, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, I've sewn this to it. I forgot I'd pinned it. So remove the pins. That would help, wouldn't it? And we need to top stitch the flap underneath the flap, this side of the flap, across there. Goodness me, I'm all fingers and thumbs, look. So I'm going to trim this again like I did the other side, but we're going to top stitch, have this open like that, and top stitch through the layers along here. Before I sew, I wanted to pop back and show you, because it's quite important, that to do this top stitching, you're at risk of these folding up like they are there and getting in the way, and then you'd top stitch like that and it would be horrendous. So as I've done on this side, what we need to do, I'll turn that round and need to turn it back again, is get my ironing pad out of the way, is to pull as tightly as you can to get the lining out of the way. Don't go through the flap, but go through the exterior, but just keep the flap out of the way. And this is what I do for my top stitching of my bags normally, but we do that, I'm used to doing that at the very end. So I want to do that one again. You've really got to pull on it tightly. Show it's who's boss. Okay, and then I'm just going to press to give them a definite edge. I'm so glad I've used headliner. Had I used my flex foam, I'd have been in trouble by now with the thickness of it. So I'm very glad I have used headliner. So as you can see, they're nicely pulled apart. The zip's got a nice free run. And then, oops, that pin's sticking up rather precariously. Okay. Turn it over, and now I can top stitch without fear of making a mess underneath. Right, so I've top stitched. Now I have top stitched with a bit of a distance, a bit further than I would normally. Normally I stitch really close to the edge like I did here, but I just felt that it needed to be a bit lower than usual. And when I turn over, you can see the stitch line there. It's nice and straight. I'm not worried about it being lower than normal. I'm happy with how straight it is. And now I should do the same on this side with top stitching. Okay, so I've top stitched on this side as well, and the distance match. So long as your top stitching matches on each side, it's fine. And as you can see here, it's even that way. Now we need to turn over, and we're looking at the side with the D-rings attached, and we're going to place the remaining zip on here, and I'm getting some tape. Okay, so now with the zip earlier, if you're right-handed, we placed the zipper pull on the right. So now we want to do the opposite and place the zipper pull on the left. So you're doing the opposite of what you did earlier. And again, like I did earlier, I'm turning it upside down so I can see what I'm doing. And face it down. You've got 1/2 inch each end. Like so. So you've got 1/2 inch each end. And if I hadn't used double-sided tape, I'd go and baste it. If you're not using tape, just go and baste it an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to place another bit of tape, this time the whole length. Like so. Double-sided tape is not easy to get off. Goodness me. Oh, got it. Okay. And then we get a remaining piece of lining. Now I've got the 2 blank pieces. It's entirely up to you where you place your slip pockets. You may want to do slip pockets on all 4 pieces, I don't know. But choose your linings on how you want. This pocket's going to have no slip pockets at all, so it's just going to have lots of room for bigger items to go in. Right, and now I'm taking it to the machine. I'm going to stitch at 3/8 inch seam allowance like I did with the other side of the other pockets. So here I've stitched it across and just fold it back. I'm just going to press that away, fold it over, and I'm going to do the same on this side. And as I did before, I'm going to, all fingers and thumbs here, look, there's so much fabric. I'm going to pin away from the zip for top stitching. It just keeps the lining away so it doesn't fold up on itself. And then I'm going to top stitch along here. So I've top stitched at exactly the same distance as the other side, just to make sure it matches. Everything has to be uniform, so if you stitch it a wider top stitch, stick to that. So that way it won't look odd. Okay, so now what we need to do is get our remaining lining piece, and I'm going to put some double-sided tape along the top. I've accidentally used my wider one, which I didn't mean to do, but not to worry. And then we want to get, as we did before, we've got the lining to lining, right sides together, and place along the zip edge like so. And if you baste in place, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, now what we're going to do is bring the bag up like so. And I'm going to get some more double-sided tape. Place along there. I hope you can get to see all this in the shot. I'm working a bit blind here, but this is a new angle I'm using, so I'm praying that I have got it all within sight. And then place so you've got the two exterior fabrics right sides together now. So you've got this, the first linings you did, and the second linings you've done. We're going to stitch along here. I'm going to do 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And stick to the seam allowance that you've done the others to. So once we've stitched the two together, attach the D-ring lining exterior piece to the zip, we need to fold the linings back, and as I did with all the others, pull it and pin it to get it nice and taut. And then you have to put this on the machine for the last row and top stitch on your machine very carefully, so all the way to the end if you can. If you can't, there are instructions on the tutorial on how to do start and stop for the top stitching. Most machines can, so hopefully you will be able to. And once you've done that, we then need to put the linings right sides together, both ends, and we need to pin or clip all the way round. Make sure both zips are undone, and then at either end, I'm going to do it at the end that doesn't have any pockets, and I'm going to leave a nice wide gap, as wide as I dare, for turning. So I'll probably stitch in about 1 inch each side and stop and double stitch back so that that can be turned through. So I'm going to do that, and then I shall come back when it's all sewn and go from there. I sewed all the way round and leaving the opening on this lining, and I've turned it right side out. Just check that everywhere is caught in that should be. There's the D-rings are all how they should be, they're not falling out. Just checking that one, that's just in there thankfully. So yeah, just check that you're happy with the placement of everything. And I then thought, oh no, I haven't added the lock. Phew, we didn't need to at this at this stage. So I'm very glad. I thought I'd missed it, but I haven't. So now we have to install the lock. So what I did was, I've got my flap and I've got my washer that I like to use as my template. And I measured the halfway point and drew a line. Then placed this over the top and basically just eyeballed it really and thought, yep, that's central. Then drew around and drew the place for the eyes, because you need to know that where they're going to puncture through. So sometimes I use my twist lock and sometimes I use my punch pliers. And I've got to the biggest hole, which is 4.5 mils, and I like to punch a hole where the screws will go, where this circle is. So that's that one hole, then another one. Just turn it over and make sure I get all the cotton out. Okay, so and you just have to fiddle about. So I'm going to cut the hole out here, and rather than bore you to death, I shall come back when I've done it. I could have filmed it, it didn't take long at all actually. I used my craft knife and I just literally cut like that and cut that hole out. So that's what I pulled out, and then I just checked that I was happy with where it was going, and turn over, and can you see that I've got a good position over the screw holes, and this is in a good position. And what I like to do is add some of my June Taylor's fray block, just to stop the risks, the chances of it fraying over time and gradually sort of fraying undone. So I do it on this side. I'm just going to turn my iron on, because to speed things up I just iron it dry so that I'm not waiting for it to dry. I'm wrestling with this against the, I've got drawers that have all my hardware in, and I'm wrestling because it's so long. It keeps bashing against the drawers. So just iron this dry. To save waiting, and just proceed with it. And again, push the lock on, turn it over. I'm going to fold this, see if it will fold under just to behave itself. Right, and then I just like to tuck it down, put the washer on, and just, if you can see the fabric poking out, just poke it down inside. Like so. Okay. So we get our screws. Put that one in first, actually. And I don't screw all the way down. I only go so far. And then I come over to this side and screw this one down. And before I screw it all the way down, again, just tucking any bits of fabric inside. I'm not too worried about these little threads because I will use a lighter to get rid of them. A ratchet screwdriver and it's playing up. Okay, happy with that, and I just very carefully get my lighter and a few stubborn ones just wanting to not go, but you get the idea. Right, let's check, because I think it shifted. Oh no, it is alright. I thought it had shifted, twisted round and was not lined up straight, but that last bit did it. And then just get rid of the excess little threads however you can. The lighter wouldn't quite do it for some reason. I didn't want to push it because I didn't want to set fire to my bag. So that's good. No, I'm pleased with that. Right, so that's the female part of the lock attached. And now we need to do the male part. So what you need to do is line up your bag, do the clasps in the D-rings like so. So you've got an idea of where the lock will be when you place this over, and then I just come up a little bit. You need to allow for the bag to be filled with things. If you go flat tight, you're not going to get this locked when the bag's full. So just allow for it to come up, I mean, it's possible on the instructions that it does say, actually, just looking. Oh no, it tells you to do what I'm doing. So I hadn't read that far ahead. So yeah, I'm comfortable with it being like that. So I'm just going to mark for roughly where I want it to be. And what I want to do is line up properly to make sure it's going to be smack bang in the middle. Oh, and it is. So we get our washer. I've drawn a line for the mark. And I want to check where these go in. Right, it's one of those that doesn't quite fit. So, as it only goes over 5 holes, I line up the centre, I forget that one, line up the centre one over the line I drew, and then draw lines for cutting. So there I've marked what I want to do. Pull the lining out, because the last thing we want to do is cut into the lining. And then I get my craft knife, and keeping my fingers out of the way, my fingers are here, cut into gently. I was so tempted to go, just to scare the living daylights out of you then. That would have just been wicked. I resisted the temptation. Okay, so just want to get rid of those marks that I made there. And push into the hole. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm going to get some more of the June Tailor. Again, for exactly the same reason. I'm not worried about letting it dry at this point, that's fine. Push them through. And then go down into the hole. And I'm going to use my pliers, if I can find them, because that's a bit of a tough one. So I'm going to use my pliers to bend it. That's better, just to get it going. Goodness me, that is a strong one. Unless it's just me being a weakling today, which is very possible. And persevere. Right, I'm going to get my husband to help me with this because I'm struggling with folding it down. I'm a bit of a weakling. I shall be back momentarily. Okay, so that's installed. I'm happy with that. And now we need to just iron this seam to get a nice, even, neat finish. tell you, the trouble with making bags with black fabric, it's very hard to see in certain lights, and now it's dark. Even with my daylight lamps, it's still hard to see. Once you get a shadow, that's it. You've got no chance. So, make sure that's nice and even. And then, trimming any threads. And then I like to get some of my good old trusty double-sided tape, just to hold that in place. I used to use steamer seam, but I just find this easier. But it still is very good and has its uses. So peel the double-sided tape backing off and then press them together. I should have also said actually that if you wanted to add a handmade label like that one, do that before you close this. But to be honest with you, when I folded this over and I looked and I felt that the label would actually ruin the look of the bag, so I decided not to put one on. So I'm going to stitch this closed and carry on from there. So I've stitched that closed and we tuck that in. Tuck it into the corners, push it right down. And there we have our bag made. Isn't it lovely? It's so clever. Very clever design. So just need to make the straps now. Glad I didn't add the handle personally, but you may like to add the handle. I think it's quite a nice little touch. But I shall make the handles next. Okay, most annoyingly, I filmed making the strap for the bag and none of it came out. The disc was corrupt, so I lost it all. So luckily it's only that little bit. So what I'm going to do is just show you on this short piece of fabric. It's easier to get it in. Sorry, I'm yawning away. So what we need to do is make the piece of fabric the length of the strap that the pattern calls for. And then if you fold it in half, wrong sides together, and press it, and then take the raw outer edges and fold them into the center. Like so. And then just fold them together again, and this time make sure that you're meeting the edges up evenly so they're not overlapping either side. And that's that. Oh. Okay, so imagine that's the full length of your strap. Now what we need to do is open it up and fold it the other way, just at the ends, and meet the ends evenly. Then take it to your machine and stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to quickly do that now. Bear with me. And you need to do both ends. Okay, so now you've got the ends that look like that. And you need to, oh, I forgot one important thing. Just to trim a little off the corners, only a little bit. And then you need to fold them and push the corners out. At both ends. Like so. So you've got a nice squared off edge. And then you want to stitch the gap closed basically. Stitch all the way round, which I'm going to do, and then I'll come back to show you how to finish the strap off. Right, so I've sewn it, and what you need to do then is get your ruler and mark a line 3 inches from the end. Just mark a line. And then you want to mark a dot in the centre, 1/4 inch in from the edge, and then another dot 1/2 inch in from the last dot, so 3/4 inch from the edge. So that's 1/4 inch from the edge and 3/4 inch from the edge. Then fold the strap over to meet the line. Oh, I beg your pardon. Punch your holes, whatever punch you use. Punch your holes out, then fold to meet the line. Get your marker pen, friction pen, whatever pen you use, and put in the dots to mark the spots where you need to punch the next holes. Punch the holes, then put your strap through the clasp, fold over, and then add your rivets. Simple as that. And do that. Make sure when you're doing this that you fold both ends of the same side over. You don't want to do that. And that's it. So there's the bag. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you do use my tutorial, I'd be very grateful when you post your bags in the groups that you post a link to this tutorial so that other people can see it too, and learn of it. And that's my sort of reward for doing it, if you know what I mean. So I'd be very grateful if you would do that. I get quite disheartened sometimes when I see people posting them and they don't post the link, and I think, oh, what a shame. Because it's nice for others to know about it. So I would be very grateful if you would. There's a share button on here. That you can press to get the link, or I always post the link in the video description that you can copy and paste. So there we have it. Happy stitching, and I'll see you again soon.